Space Engineers, a game in which you can do anything and the only limit is your imagination, and the game's mechanics. Space Engineers is an incredible game, with incredible and seamless scale, as well as being one of the first of its kind, and has been one of the leading games in the space sandbox genre. For instance, you can be on Earth building a taco van, while your buddy, thousands of kilometers away on Mars, can be building a warship which will shred anything it comes into contact with. However, it is not without its problems. This will be the topic of today's video. Space Engineers Survival Mode has been a core part of the game since its addition, and has gone through one revision since, prior to which the experience was very bare bones and not very new player friendly. The revision of Survival Mode was released February 28, 2019. The updated mode restructured the early game gameplay loop. Players would be able to choose to spawn on a few different planets in either a drop pod or buggy depending on the planet of their choice, after which they would drop from the sky and begin mining resources in order to start producing building components in order to progress through the tech tree of blocks. The initial struggle associated with starting a new world is one I adore fondly, especially when reminiscing of playthroughs with friends. The struggle involves managing power, limited resources, and oxygen. Now you're probably wondering, isn't that the point of progression? Well, yes, but when that struggle isn't replaced with anything else, what's the point in playing after that? Now before you say, but Paso, the aim of the game is to do what you want. Let me ask you this, what is there to do after you get to space and have a jump drive or two on your desired ship? For me, besides sightseeing almost geographically identical planets, there isn't all that much to do, besides going around and taking on some of the AI enemies which run around the Sol system, building some ships or bases, and doing contracts. But again, this doesn't last very long until it becomes meaningless. So by now, I hope I've made it apparent that Space Engineers mid-game and endgame is somewhat lacking in content. So in contrast with this, I've come up with two ideas which I think would add to the Space Engineers experience. Something found in nearly all games is boss battles. These motivate players to keep playing and serve as the drive to keep going. A game which I think excels in its use of bosses is Valheim, a Viking survival game. Now, although it is drastically different from Space Engineers, I believe Space Engineers could learn a thing or two about the progression in Valheim, which involves working your way up to bosses in order to progress to the next stage of the game. There are a total of 5 main bosses to fight, with each providing you with a resource or piece of equipment which will either give you access to the next part of the game, or allow you to make better gear. I think Space Engineers could borrow this method of progression via placing different bosses on each of the planets found in the Sol system. Now, due to Space Engineers' current limitations, I believe this could be most easily done via large enemy AI-controlled grids, which could be defeated by destroying a series of power sources. Once defeated, players could then approach the husk of the boss grid and access a cargo container, which could provide the player with either better character equipment such as guns or tools, or could provide the player with a higher tier of thrusters, block armor, or defenses. This could come in the form of blueprints or the blocks themselves. This gear would allow players then to improve their current builds in order to take on the next bosses. Now, unlike Valheim, I don't think this progression should be as strictly linear, as that would defeat the whole reason for Space Engineers being an open world sandbox game. Instead, what I propose is the order of bosses being up to the player, with their order in which to fight them being vaguely linked to the player's current level of access to blocks and resources. And by that I mean you probably won't be fighting the boss located on Mars if you started on Earth and haven't got to space yet. Another system I think would improve the overall experience is physical, in-world, non-grid NPCs.
Place in New York City. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, we made it to Central Park. Here's this thing. Cool.
It's the end of the world and people buy toilet paper. I guess they plan to shit themselves to death.
Must be.
This is something I believe most of the community wants, and for good reason. Personally, I feel like they would make the world feel a lot more alive and living. These NPCs could be both friendly and unfriendly. And above all things, enemy NPCs would give character weapons a bit more use, particularly in single player worlds. As of the making of this video, you can only really use them on grids and other players, which, let's be honest, you don't run into many players in a server. Anywho, a similar game which has managed to pull this off is Empyrion: Galactic Survival, which does not appear to be as complicated as Space Engineers when it comes to seamless scale and physics, but nonetheless manages to fill its worlds with living NPCs, which can be found in clubs or social hubs or in randomly generated bunkers, which can be raided for loot. I believe if Space Engineers were to incorporate this element, there would be a lot more activity to fill in the gaps from mid-game to endgame. So now I want to hear what you think would improve the game, so tell me in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, and that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.